We are so fragile. Advertising lies that are whiter than yours. We are so fragile. They could give us a war just to keep us amused. We are so fragile. But I can stay here inside and see it's all we've done. We are so fragile. Just pretend I'll never try to leave it up to you.
Do you remember much about the John Peel session that you did, which was kind of the start of the Pleasure Principle sessions, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we did too, and they've kind of blurred a bit. I think I can only remember one, but I'm probably remembering all of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So bits and pieces. Yeah, I remember realising how important it was and how cool it was to be doing it, and it felt like especially the first one, I suppose, because nothing had happened at all. It felt like a real opportunity, and just being asked to do it, to be on the radio, it felt like a huge step forward to anything that had happened before, and being really worried about wanting it to sound just right, and being quite stressed about the whole thing but it was good experience. The thing about John Peel sessions is you only had a few hours to do it, so it wasn't as if you spent days in the studio sort of perfecting, which is one of the things that was slightly sort of frustrating about it. Really, you could spend, well, I say weeks, but in those days it was still only days.
Yeah.
But you spend a fair amount of time in the studio, getting your songs as good as you could, and then you got this chance to play them on the radio, and you had like 3 hours or something to do all 3 songs. It was all this mad rush to try to recreate what you'd done in the studio. So it was quite stressful, and there wasn't a lot of time. There wasn't any sort of experimenting went on. You just went in there and did your best to recreate your studio version as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It's just so getting the vocal done quickly was really important. Everyone had to do their parts really quickly because you just didn't have time for doing lots and lots of overdubs. So, but again, that added a certain sort of excitement to it. But apart from that, there's not that much to say about Peel sessions.
Yeah.
The studio you did them in was old-fashioned and basic and made of Val. The people that you worked with, they were very friendly. Had every week they would have sort of upstart little bands coming through, that most of which never came to anything anyway. So they probably just sort of used to churning this stuff out, and then I come along with this weird little electronics.
Were you dressed up?
Well, I've seen photographs where I'm wearing jeans with turn-ups, and obviously not. No.
I don't know. I don't remember seeing pictures of the second session.
No, I can't remember the second one, but certainly the first one.
Yeah.
No, I still had the same old clothes on I had before. Because I wasn't famous then. I didn't have any money or anything.
Do you remember the first time that you actually rehearsed with Cedric and everyone? How you discovered them?
I can remember Cedric's audition. Yeah, we was auditioning drummers downstairs at one of the Meg's banquet shops, Fulham, I think it was. And Gerald was there to oversee it, because he would be able to spot a good drummer from a not so good one, which I probably wouldn't. And Cedric stood out. Out of the few people, not many people turned up actually. I think I had 4 or 5, I can't remember for sure, but one bloke complained because it was too difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we was asking to play Down in the Park and Our Friends Electric, and he said it's too complicated.
Yeah.
God, yeah, that's just ridiculous. And then one bloke turned up, and he still had he was a builder, and he had these sort of big boots on with bits of concrete stuck in them and things, and he said, I can't play because I've got my boots on. Why'd you come in them then? It's a load of usual sort of nonsense really when people turn up for auditions, and then Cedric came in and just blitzed it.
Yeah.
You know, could do everything really easily and sounded brilliant, and you know, just straight off was really, really good. So that was a no contest, really.
I mean, was there ever any point where you thought, I mean, you were absolutely sure that you wanted a drummer? There was never, even though you were switching to electronic music, you didn't think about using drum machines more or trying to
No,
get
not
into
really. Because my thing with electronics had always been to, generally speaking, actually, to add them to conventional lineup. I liked conventional lineups. I like guitars and bass and drums and things like that. So I didn't want to replace it. I just wanted to add to it. I thought it would add. I thought electronic music would add a new layer to what there'd been before, which I was perfectly happy with. You know, didn't have a problem with that. So no, I wanted a band, and I wanted it to be as live as possible. And strangely, the Pleasure Principle was the one album I ever made where I deliberately didn't have guitars on it, because I was trying to prove a point, really. You know, I actually don't think I did it very well, to be honest. But you know, trying to prove the point that you could have full-blown, you know, fully developed music, and you didn't have to have a guitar. You didn't have to, you know, follow this sort of conventional route of putting music together, which kind of went against what I was aiming for in general, as I say. And it's the only time I ever did it, and I tend to think, sort of looking back on it, that it was just a bit pointless, really. You know.
See, I love the starkness to it because it doesn't have guitars. It makes you hear things in a slightly different way, I suppose. Or
Well, it forces you to do different things. You know, there are certain things you get to a certain point in a song where a guitar comes into its own and has, you know, a very useful function. So if you don't have one, you've got to find other ways of getting around that problem. And from a production point of view, you know, what do you do to add that element of power, or whatever it might be that the guitar is doing? So it sort of encouraged you to think a little bit differently, I suppose. But I don't think it's such a, it seems such a big thing at the time. It seemed like a really important point to make. But looking back on it, I don't see it as being particularly useful, really. All I did was cut myself off from some good noises.
yeah, you see, I don't know, because I mean, I think one of the reasons why, which is sort of related to Cedric as well, why so many people in America and the hip hop thing is very connected to Pleasure Principle, is partly that it's not, whereas Replica still has a lot of guitars and is kind of, as you say, it's kind of a band thing with the sort of chug 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 punky guitars on there.
Yeah.
You know, Pleasure Principle doesn't have any of that, and it seems to have therefore meant something to a whole other group of people who don't reference actually replicas that much. You know, people like Bambata and all the samples and the covers have tended to be things like films, haven't they, or metal.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's part of it. It's that sort of starkness with the rhythm is something that actually connects with their interest in music or their areas of music.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, there's a lot more interest in it from a sampling point of view, by far, than there ever has been for replicas. Not that replicas doesn't have any, but you know, there's a huge imbalance between the two of them. So yeah, Pleasure Principle seems to have something about it that those particular people like. There's no doubt about it that not having guitars on it, it gave it a sound, which it definitely would not have had if it had guitars on it. So if you like that sort of thing, then it was a good move.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, looking back on it, I shouldn't. It's not that I'm against what we did, really, because you know, I've ended up with an album which has, you know, got its sort of long-term fans, really, and that's a cool thing. But I just think it's a kind of a flawed idea, really, to deliberately not have certain things in a record. I'm not going to use that, and I'm not going to use that. If it makes you come up with other ideas in a really creative way, so that, you know, there's a really sort of creative approach to getting around those particular self-made problems, then I would feel more satisfied with it, I think. But I'm not entirely sure I got away with it from that point of view. And yeah, we did get around not having a guitar by doing other things, but personally, I wouldn't sort of stand up and say it was all highly creative and it really, really worked and it sort of forged a different sort of direction musically. I don't think any of that. I just think it hasn't got guitars on it, really, and maybe it should have had.
I think Cedric has said in the past that you had quite a different sort of interesting approach to how you wanted him to play as well. So although he, you wanted drums, you wanted a rock drummer involved, it was very much like kind of more hypnotic kind of grooves going round.
Yeah, I don't really like all this cymbals and ride cymbals and all that sort of stuff. Never really have been a big fan of that sort of drumming. So I wanted something which was much more, not robotic, I hate that expression, but much more just fixed groove running through it. So which is more drum machine-like, I suppose, but with the input of a real player and the feel of a real player and that variation that a real player would put into it. You will do little feels that you're not expecting. I like that side of it, but I was never really a big rock drummer, simple sort of man. I just don't think it suited the sort of music that I was making. It wouldn't have been appropriate at all. When Cedric was really good at giving me just what I wanted.
So you already knew by the time you found Cedric what kind of thing you wanted him to do?
It was
a drummer.
It was just a constantly evolving thing, really.
Right.
One day I'd sort of figure out a particular style, if you like, of how I would want the drums. Another day I'd figure out a particular style for bass or whatever, or the sort of sounds or effects I wanted on drums. And it really was a case of every time I went in the studio I would learn a bit more, and it would help to fine-tune, if you like, what I was aiming for. I mean, it was new to all of us, really, and I think for everyone, especially me, it was just a little voyage of discovery every time you went in, because it wasn't as if we had all this equipment at home. We were sitting at home for days and days just working with it. We didn't have it at home. We couldn't afford it, so it'd only be when we got into a studio that we could work with it, and you had those day or 2 days, whatever it might be, while you had it, to learn how it all worked. What did these knobs and dials do, and what did that switch do, and it was all really concentrated, as well as trying to record the things you're going in there for in the first place. So it was really exciting, and it really did feel as if you were doing something new, but you was always aware of that you didn't really know what you were doing, and so you were just figuring things out as you went along, for that particular song or for that particular track almost. So as each album come along in those early days, they were quite different to the one before, because you'd learned so much in that short space of time. But after when you've done a lot, the differences between them from a production point of view become sort of much harder to gauge, really, because there aren't these great big leaps of knowledge and understanding as there were when we first started. We say we did first three albums in 12 months, and you're going to learn a lot when you spend that amount of time in the studio, when you knew absolutely nothing to start with.
Because it's interesting. I think at the time some of the differences between the albums in some ways were less evident then, but going back now, as you say, going on to something like Telecon, the writing's a bit more sophisticated on it, isn't it? And you've got the guitars back, but actually the grooves aren't really there. I mean, if you think of a lot of the material, it's a lot of it's got a slower pace, and it doesn't really. I mean, there's nothing on there particularly like Films or that has that kind of swing and almost funkiness, that seems to come out. I mean, where did something like Films come from? Was it basically you were playing that kind of riff melody line, and then Cedric would come up with an idea, or did you start with a drum groove and build stuff around? Can you remember how those tracks developed?
I don't think there was a way of working which would apply to the whole album anyways. It would have been song by song. But these days I have more of a set pattern of how I put songs together. Something like Films, difficult to know whether I would have come up with something on a drum machine first, then just got Cedric to play it for real, whether it was started with the bass line, and then I would have I'd normally go in the studio with him and sort of sing how I wanted the drums to go.
Right.
A bit like the child. And sometimes, obviously, Cedric would have had his own input on it as well. Difficult to say, really. I don't remember films specifically as to how it was all put together. I don't remember hardly any of them specifically, but it was a lot more varied in those days as to how things came about. A lot of it was drum machine driven to start with. Quite a lot of it was just keyboard groove, start with that, and then build things up around it. I used to write most things at home with one of those little clicking metronome gadgets. So everything was done to a click, and you can hear it in a lot of it, which have all got the same sort of groove thing attached to them. Anyway, yeah, no, I wish I could remember more actually about how the various songs were put together. You things like Metal, which Aid Fenton keeps saying sounds like My Sharona. I'm not having it, but it does a bit. So obviously would have been just sitting there and playing with a groove on a keyboard, and that would have been the first thing to come. Films, I've got a feeling that films actually might have started with a big keyboard fanfare thing,
right?
And the little groove came later. Yeah, I don't remember, unfortunately. Wish I did.
Where did the hand claps? I mean, I suppose in terms of while we're talking about the rhythm and the percussion, the one thing that's very much stylistically strong on that record is there is this kind of hand clap thing going on all through.
Is
pretty
it?
much. I mean, if you think of
the whole album.
Well, you think Cars has got it on, Metal. There's
Is
that.
it?
Yeah. It's that.
I don't know.
You don't
I don't remember it. I'm so used to doing the versions that we do live, and I've long forgotten what's on the original. I can't remember the last time I heard the original of any Pleasure Principle song, to be honest. Even when we do new versions live, which we, occasionally we'll revamp it live, I revamp the previous version.
Right.
I don't go back to the original and start again, and which maybe I should actually, because perhaps you move further and further away from what was on it before. When doing this thing with Nin, I think their version is probably a lot more like the original, and there's bits of it I don't even remember doing. So I have to learn the original again. Yeah, I don't remember hand claps at all being on it.
Really?
No.
But you must remember there was that period where the hand claps were sort of quite a big. You'd have them on all the videos, wouldn't you? Do you remember that? I mean, even if you think
I remember
of Cars,
Wheel Glass.
and
doing
Cars, like when the cameras and all the band are doing the hand claps.
Are they?
Yeah, like in a uniform. Is he?
What, stand on the keyboard?
No, they're sort of lined up, and you see them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I thought it was a theme. I thought it was the Gary Numan hand claps. It was like a little style thing that came in.
It probably was. Yeah. God, honestly, man, my memory is so disgusting. Every time we do these things, I moan about my memory. It's not getting any better, is it?
No. I suppose I'm just connecting all this up, just before we move on from the hip-hop thing, because again, it is quite amazing that back in the early 80s, there was this album of breakbeats, which has got films on. And, I mean, if you actually look at what other songs they would have on these records, they were all things like Parliament, and it was almost all black stuff, from the 70s, usually, and some from the 60s. And then there's this sort of white guy from, West London doing electronic music in the middle of all this stuff, as one of the original breakbeats in hip-hop.
Yeah.
I mean, when did you become aware of that? I mean...
About 1996, it was. I had no idea for such a long time. And then heard about... actually, I remember somebody called Sir Mix-a-Lot. I remember seeing that come in when he clearance on, might have been films actually. I remember thinking, that's a strange... I wouldn't have thought Cars would have been used for that sort of thing. But that was right at the end of it. I hadn't realised that for the sort of 15 years or more, 18 years more before that, it had been used. I mean, I'm told that films, I think, is one of the most heavily sampled, heavily used samples in that sort of music. And it got used again recently. That was that Wu-Tang Clan man, singer. He used it for something, didn't he?
Yeah.
So,
We basically took the whole backing track
yeah.
and rapped over the top.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, even if you think that things like people like Beastie Boys, a lot of their rhythms actually quite close to films. It's all that. I'm not going to do Beastie Boys impression, but you can hear it in there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm quite proud of that, to be honest. I wish I'd been more aware of it when it was really happening. It would have been, it'd been really sort of quite cool to have been around when all that was sort of growing, and to been aware that I was a part of it. I don't know.
I mean, I've been told, and I don't know whether this is true, but someone did tell me that Cars, part of the reason that Cars broke in the States is that some black American radio did play it as well. It got played on some black stations because it had that kind of funky sort of feel to it as well.
I did hear that, but I was told that they didn't know it was white. Didn't know it was
really?
English. Didn't know it was English. Didn't know it was white.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know. These stories build over the years, don't they? So I don't know how true that is, but I was told that it was being played in the black station. Not that they stopped playing it when they found out, but yeah.
So you got the band together, and so you got the emerging Pleasure Principle band. Let's call them at this stage. But I suppose the final edition, who then came in, well, the two final editions, who then came in for the tour, is Billy Curry's the first one. I mean, he actually appears at the end of Pleasure Principle sessions, doesn't he? He plays on one or two little bits.
Yeah, I think so.
Sort of outros.
Well, it was Billy Curry that I remember going to see Billy Curry a lot with Ultravox, and then when I got to know him, the fact that he used ARP Odyssey instead of the Mini Moog, he was much more an ARP sort of man, and I really liked the sound that he got. So I started to switch from the Mini Moog onto the ARP, which isn't a radical change at all, really. They're both sort of quite similar in most ways, but I was constantly looking around to see what people did and what was better and how I could improve, and just trying to learn all the time, every day, really, just trying to learn how I could do it better, and just try to understand, because as I said before, it was as new to me, really, as people listening to it, and I was just stumbling along, really. I hadn't been. A lot of people, they've been to college and they look. I didn't know you could do courses on them.
Right.
Yeah, and they knew all about envelopes and filters and what they did. And where did you learn that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew nothing about that. Still, I don't really. I still just stumbled along, really.
So had you met Billy Curry like at gigs, and I mean, how?
No, I've been to see Ultravox quite a lot of times, but I never got to meet them. They were kind of rock stars as far as I was concerned. They were doing headline in the marquee. The giddy heights. And so I never spoke to them. I was quite in awe of John Fox as well. He was kind of weird. Always seemed to be really strangely weird to me, in a good way. In a way that you want to go keep seeing them, and you. I always think it's good if people are. If you meet your pop stars and you just don't know what you're going to say, because they seem to be slightly different in some way, it's a good thing. Anyway, he certainly had that. He certainly had that for me.
So when did you first see them? Was it around the time of Systems of Romance? Was it before that?
No, it must have been Systems of Romance. Either just as that came out, or maybe just before. But I think because when I got all their albums, I can't quite remember now the order of it. So it might have been before Systems of Romance, but I don't think so. It would have been late '78 onwards. Maybe I started going to see them. It's just that I seemed to see them quite a lot of times before I got famous, and I wasn't doing it very long before I got famous. It made you think maybe I was into them before, but I don't think so really. Late '78. When I first started getting into electronic music myself, is then when I found other people to go and look at, them being the main one. No, I met Billy after they had split up, and then I come along, and I was looking for another keyboard player for the band and a guitar player. So I got Russell, and I can't remember how I approached Billy, or who approached Billy, or how it all went. But I remember being really sort of honoured that he was wanting to be in the band, and I was quite starstruck actually.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they hadn't been famous, to me he was still there. It's funny because when I got famous, I didn't suddenly start thinking of myself as being famous. You know, it's a silly thing to say, but all the people that I looked up to before, even though I was now much bigger than almost all of them, I still had that same attitude that I had when I was going to see them. You know, they were still up there. Yeah, it's just been some quirk of circumstance that got me where I was.
Yeah.
You know, these were still the people, and I was quite intimidated by quite a few of them. Billy being one of them for about the first hour, and then he's just all right, isn't he? So.
Yeah. So is he? I mean, was he very enthusiastic about what you were doing? Was he, you know?
Yeah, no, he seemed great. He's very, very enthusiastic about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sort of being in the band and touring. I think he just loves touring. Actually,
Yeah.
I think he could have been in anyone's band. I don't really remember. I just remember that he was good fun. Good fun to be around. A really good player, and bit of a camera hogger.
Right.
You watch any of the Top of the Pops on TV that we did when Billy Carey's in it, and you'll see him. Be leaning in. You know, be me in the distance. There'd be a little face to come leaning in the front. Got a lot of that. But no, it's good. It's good fun. Hugely proud of his penis, as I remember. Would lob it out at any opportunity. Got us banned from at least 2 hotels, I think, on the first tour, just by waving it around a lot.
So, I mean, the other, I guess, real thing that happens with Pleasure Principle is it's something to do with the Moogs and the sound you actually get on Pleasure Principle. It's very much focused around a particular sound, isn't it, on the Polymoog?
We're two really. That there's the bass end of it was all that sort of low oscillator mini Moog stuff, really fat, but you spread the oscillator slightly so it just fattens the whole sound out. So a very big fat low end.
Yeah.
For its time, and the high Polymoog sound, which is most notable, I suppose, in cars. There's the big high sound that comes at the front of cars, and those two sounds, I think, not exclusively but largely define the sound of the whole album. Really, I had used a Polymoog before on the Replicas album, but with Pleasure Principle they brought out like an updated version of it, which had less controllability but slightly more preset
Right.
sounds, which you could then jigger about a little bit, and it was one of those really that called Vox Humana that was the main sound I think we used for all the high string stuff anyway on Pleasure Principle.
I mean, was it a eureka moment when you found it? I mean, do you think that is the sound that I want for the album? That's it?
Yeah, it was actually. It was like one sound. I was out with Mighty Mills, I think, from Beggar's Banquet, looking for equipment to use for Pleasure Principle, and it was coming across that sound that I was only allowed to have two keyboards,
Right.
because that's all they could afford.
So what stage was this? Was this before Our Friends Electric had...
No, we would have.
Or it was
I
just after?
think Replicas would have been done, but no, it hadn't happened, chart-wise, so to speak. So, remember these albums really close together. I was in the studio making Pleasure Principle, or certainly the demos of it at least, as Our Friends Electric started to do what it was doing. So there was a big overlap between the two. So it was pretty much studio, album studio, just keeping, as you'd finish one, you'd almost straight away go into start working on demos for the next one, because I was just writing stuff so quickly. As I say, 3 albums in 12 months is a lot.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
don't do that anymore.
So you've had this eureka moment with the Polymoog, and
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same as when I found synthesizers the first time. I mean, that really was a life-changing moment, and it was hugely important, and I almost sort of recognised it at the time as being a massively important moment, and it felt like everything was now going to change musically for me anyway. This was what I've been looking for, And then when the Polymoog thing came along, it didn't have quite the same impact as that, but I knew for me it was a significant part of where I wanted my sound to go. Which seems quite small-minded now, to be honest, because the idea of one sound sort of defining an album, I can imagine that now. If we haven't got 30 or 40 brand new sounds that I've not heard before per album, then I feel like I've been idle. So, but in those days, it wasn't. You didn't have quite as much sort of choice as you have now, and it was quite an important moment, finding that particular sound.
That sound, the Vox Humana sound. When people think about the sort of Gary Numan sound, I think a lot of people would think about that, wouldn't they? It's that string sound on cars.
Yes.
And it's almost impossible for any other musician to ever use that sound really now. I would say that it is so readily identified with you.
Well, because Cars was such a big single, then it becomes a fairly well-known sound, So it kind of does sort of bugger it for other people, I suppose. But all it really is just high strings. People have used high strings before, and probably will again. But that particular sound is quite, it's sort of quite noticeable, I suppose. But I've done Cars constantly since I wrote it, and I think apart from maybe the first tour, I've never used Vox Humana again.
Right.
But when people hear it, it sounds like Cars. So it's just, as I say, it's just a string sound. But I think the problem is when certain pieces of equipment come along, like the D50 was a prime example, there are certain sounds on those machines which sort of identify it really, really badly, and they're brilliant. But once they've been used, then you're buggered really. And I think that was possibly true of the Polymoog. With that one, nobody could really use that. As soon as you use that sound, and it sounded like me in the day, as it were.
So you killed the Polymoog.
Yeah. Well, it could do a lot more than that, to be fair. It's a very powerful and capable machine. Lots of people use them, but that particular sound was probably no use to people anymore after that. As other sounds have been taken away by other people, digital native and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And your relationship with Mini Moogs goes a bit further back, doesn't it? When you talk about discovering that keyboard in the studio, was that a Mini Moog?
Yeah, that was a Mini Moog. Yeah, so that was 78.
Yeah.
I'm so unsure of myself now. But that was the real big eureka moment. That was the one moment, I think, in my whole life which I can really definitely say changed my life. And it was finding that Mini Moog. But if you've seen one, there's quite a mass of knobs and switches on it, and obviously I've never seen a real one before, so I had no idea how they were set up. So you can appreciate, you can appreciate how lucky it is, or was for me, that it had been left on a sound that was perfect. It was exactly the sound that I was looking for, and it was still in tune, roughly. I would never have known how to. If the man had said to me, "Have a go of it," and it had gone, do, or made some real horrible noise, I'd have been totally lost in what to have done about that to try to create the sort of sound that I was looking for. So there was sort of luck upon luck, really, that when I did try it, it had been left on. That they left it behind a tool, that I was allowed to use it. Then when I did, it was set up on the perfect sound for me at that time, and it was just the luckiest moment. And the only credit I can take from it is the fact that I recognised, when that one chance is there, that sort of life-changing moment, I recognised it for what it was and sort of took it and run with it. But just so lucky, really lucky.
So by the time you get to Push Principle, you're kind of using Mini Moogs for more kind of bottom-end riffy type stuff. Is that really where you saw?
Yeah, pretty much. They and those sort of filter sweeps.
Up those.
Technical term, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but I mean, even when I stopped using Mini Moogs, it was still a case of twiddling that to see what it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always envied these people that say that needs a little bit more contour. Does it?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I'll just twiddle that one. Yeah. Oh, that says contour. Twiddle that one. I'll still do it like that. To this day, even though now it's essentially plugins, and all your parameters will come up on the screen, I still don't really know what they do.
Right.
Some of them, but lots of them I still don't. And I go, what's that do? Mouse it. Yeah. Oh, I like that.
So it's all by sound and feel and just whatever sounds good,
just
basically.
fiddling.
Yeah.
Always fiddled. Yeah, my whole songwriting process is one of fiddling about and waiting for something interesting to happen. So it can be a bit of a worry, because I'm not going into the studio with any sort of particular talent, really. I'm going in there hoping that something interesting happens. If I twiddle around long enough, then probably something will come along that I like, be it a tune or a sound or whatever. But I can't. It's kind of sort of not chaotic, but it's a little bit.
Yeah, but I think
unsure.
I think there is a talent in recognising what is right and what isn't. I mean, recognising that certain eureka moment, or recognising that would work with that and what doesn't.
Yeah. I know a little bit more about it than I let on, but I really am. I still don't. I wouldn't think of myself as a programmer. Although having said that, I programmed D50s for Yonks and recreated all those early sounds. I suppose I can do it when I have to, but again, it was more by trial and error than going straight to the function you wanted. There are people that could look at 50 parameters on the screen and more. I know exactly what, if you push that one, then this will happen, and then you need a bit of that, and that will make that sort of sound. Genuine programmers that really understand exactly what's going on. I'm not one of them, really. Never really known that side of it at all. But I do have the patience to twiddle about. So now I've got a bit of knowledge that I can then, the twiddling on top of that gives me what I want eventually. Oh, bless it. All those years it's been doing it.
Yeah, no, well, you've broken my mini moog.
Yeah, I've definitely gifted at doing that. Oh, I really regret not having mine now. That's such a brilliant thing. See what I mean now? The fact that when I stumbled into that studio and then it had been left,
Yeah.
the fact that it was still on the sound that it was left on was miracle enough. The first few that I had, that they would never stay in tune at all. But then I can't quite remember the story now, but they did something to it. So the oscillators were a lot more stable under temperature, and
This is an early one.
yeah, because my memory of it is that
overheated
the serial numbers, they started the serial numbers again at like 10,000 or something.
Yeah.
But I might have told the lie so many times I've believed it now. Just something like that, and because I remember the first tour I did, they were really difficult. And then we got some more, and they were great.
Yeah.
They would kind of sort of stay in tune for most of the gig.
I kind of like the fact they go out, so they kind of have their
It's
own.
quite a personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, up to a point.
Well, not live. I would not use it live, obviously.
Yeah, it was once the junior thing was sorted, it was good.
So
One of the more reliable of the things used to tour,
Really?
compared to Polymoogs, which was just
Yeah.
disgracefully bad.
So if you had 8 mini moogs and each player had 2, how did that work then?
Can't remember. Chris had 2, Billy had 2, I had 2 for some reason. Russell had 1, and I think Cedric had 1. All
What was
kinds
the
of
one that you said you did play into the aliens, the noise on?
that one.
Oh, that's the one.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
got one of the tabs in it. Oh, I can't remember now, but
Funny cat or something.
is that?
Or space.
Because you used that a lot, didn't you, in CR78?
Yeah,
John
CR78.
Fox uses that.
Yeah.
That's basically his sound.
It's one of those, they tucked me up really badly one night. I remember I was Vapor, I think it starts with a little drum machine thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do this sort of cocky swagger down to the front, and they're programmed in at bar 7 to do typical bossa nova. So I was just about to get to the mic, and it suddenly went bossa nova, and it freaked me completely. And then straight back into the song, and I've missed it. Oh, bastard. So yeah, that was one of them. Had one of these.
That's a great machine.
Yeah, I like those actually. You've got a Lindrum. Hey, look at
First
that.
Lindrum, that is the ultimate drum machine ever.
Is this the one? The LM1?
Yeah.
My mate was working at a company that sold these, and he brought home they made a flexi disc
Oh yeah.
when it first came out, so you could hear the sounds in it. A flexi disc, as if anything's going to sound good. So this ropey bit of old plastic, and it just sounded like shit, you know.
Yeah.
But it was
Real drum,
brilliant,
not-
brilliant machine. I love the Lindrum. Really good hand clap.
Oh, yeah, they're all good.
So basically each person had at least one mini Moog, so if one went wrong, is that the idea?
No, to be honest, there was, although there was a certain amount of backup inherent in having the two, because you could, you know, rejiggle it if you wanted to. It was more that one would have, say, a big bass hand on it, and then another one would have a. It just saved having to do all that while he was actually playing live. Plus, it give you backup should one of them go down. That was all it was for me. I've always had a real thing about backup, like now, you know, 3 laptops and then a Tascam, yeah, just in case things go wrong. And I was like it even then, trying to make sure that if anything broke down, we had something else that could do the job. But no, it's more to do with just saving people the aggravation of having to sort of reprogram in the middle of the set, really. Especially with stuff like this, because so much of it is, you know, they were different. Everyone would be slightly different one before. You couldn't just say put it on number 4 and expect each one to sound the same. So there must be a certain amount of finding out, you know, each particular machine.
So when did you stop using the mini Moogs?
Quite early on, actually. I mean, they were definitely on replicas, obviously, and one before that. But I think it comes Pleasure Principle, because, you know, I think Pleasure Principle was using them as well. But then after that, it moved out quite a bit. So, you know, there was so much other stuff coming along now. You know, really good machines. The OBXA in particular was always my favourite of that sort of first, second generation of stuff. I thought that was brilliant.
Do you have a studio at home that you kind of got stuff in?
Nothing like this. No, I've not kept any of my old stuff. Certainly not kept anything to use.
Yeah.
I thought I'd kept a mini Moog, you know, just for old time's sake, really. And I'm pretty sure I kept Yo behind for the same reason. But I don't know where they are, and I think the mini Moog's been stolen. I've had them in my garage for so long. They've been moved from house to house, you know, as I've moved over the years. But I didn't keep any of it to use, to be honest. You know, as I felt I'd finished with one, you know, I got most of the sounds that it could do, then I just jumped on to the next one.
Yeah.
I get really into these new things that come along, and I go, oh, I wonder what that does, I wonder what that does. And I probably spend more time on that sort of thing than I do really exploring what I've got. I could probably get more out of what I've got if I just gave it a bit more time, but I don't. I get all enthused about what's coming.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of wastage, really,
Yeah.
on the way I go about things, really, which is a shame.
So I suppose the other thing, I mean, I suppose in my head, certainly back then, I linked everything up. You got this very stark sound on the record. All the guitars are stripped out. You got not exactly one sound, but there's this very dominant string sound that's kind of everything's focused on. But also lyrically, whereas Replicas kind of created a whole world, didn't it? A sort of narrative or vague narrative about the future and so on. On Pleasure Principle, everything seems to come down to the word I, and there is this real almost to the point where, you know, it's the one track called Me, or ME, where it's the last where it's the last machine on earth. And all the lyrics, I mean for me, I know Trent Reznor has said this about it being a very cold sounding album, but it is very cold sounding and very kind of obsessive, and it's the ultimate sort of isolationist album, really. to me an ultimate paranoid album. I mean, was that just how it sort of came out at the time? Because this is before, most of it would have been done before you were successful.
Certainly written before I was successful.
And even as you had become successful, you know, there were lots of lovely things happening in that first wave of success too. You know? But the album seems, as I say, compared to all your other work, I'd say it's the coldest and the most sort of paranoid sounding.
Do you reckon? I thought Telecom was quite paranoid.
Yeah, I suppose.
See, Telecom's paranoid, and I had a reason for it then.
Yeah.
Pleasure Principle is paranoid, and I haven't really got a reason for
I
it.
suppose on Telecom there's the paranoia, but it's a little bit offset because the musicality on Telecom is fleshed out. You know, you've got things like Push No More, and you've got very pretty melodies and all sorts of. You think of something like films, as say you have the big anthemic thing, you have the hypnotic groove, and then the voice, and that's it. There's nothing else.
Yeah. I think a lot of it in those days, I mean, I like to sort of be able to say that it was a deliberate intention to make it cold and all the rest of it. I think from a production point of view that's probably not entirely true, but if you think about the age that I was and the way that I've been, I mean, even in those days I'd had all the problems at school and all that sort of child psychiatry sort of stuff, so I clearly was not quite firing on all cylinders, as it were. So I was a quirky little thing even then, and I had real problems with interacting with people long before the whole Asperger's thing, true or not, was sort of identified. I definitely had problems. I was a loner. You know, I was nerdy, I suppose, in the sense I would be at home sort of working on my songs and really self-obsessed to kind of, well, actually not a ridiculous degree. I think perhaps in a way that most late teens are, a little bit self-obsessed in that sort of nobody understands me kind of vibe. Which is why some of those songs now are a little bit awkward to sing, because I'm 51 and I feel more understood now. You know, when you're singing those sort of teenage angst type lyrics, especially when it's I'm writing them, so I'm sort of really sort of magnifying all those little bits to try to make it seem more interesting, or as I thought was more interesting at the time. But nonetheless, that was the sort of person I was at that time. So I think a lot of the way the album sounds isn't just me sort of working with electronics and still having a lot to learn about how to produce things, where I perhaps could have made it a bigger, warmer sounding record if I'd have been more skillful. But it was genuinely how I was as a person. I did see things like that, and I was quite cold and very much alone, and so it was a good mirror, I suppose, of the person making it. But that might have just been more accidental than a deliberate choice when I was actually putting it together. Don't know, don't remember anymore. I do know I had issues, as they say.
Yeah, because it's very much, I mean, I seem to remember, I'm not sure, I think it was about Pleasure Principle, but certainly in that period, you know, some writers talking about your music even being unhealthy, you know, unhealthily self-obsessed. People talking about how much you use the letter I in every song, and I suppose when you, I mean, in some ways when I listened to it back then, I wasn't really aware of this stuff, but if you compare to a lot of albums that came out, you know, whether it was by The Clash or whatever, there was still very much at that time this idea of music being inclusive, wasn't it, and of, you know, expressing a communal feeling or whatever. And Pleasure Principle is about as far away from that as you can possibly get.
Yeah, well, I was quite self-obsessed. It's just, I've never really written songs as any kind of sort of social comment, or I've never really felt that connected with people to be able to voice their fears and worries and pleasures and all those sorts of things. It's always been more about me and things close to me, or what I'm feeling, or how things around me affect me. So it's and that sounds quite sort of egotistical, but it's not that. But it's the only thing I really know about, and because I don't have this, I don't have good empathy with people in general. You know, again, Asperger's perhaps, I don't know, but I don't, and so the only thing I really know, as much as I can, is sort of me and my life and those close to me and all those sort of interactions and so on. And so it's always been a little bit I and me, really. Not everything I've ever done, but that would be a common thread through everything, and was really there on the pleasure principle. And maybe if Replicas hadn't have been as sort of story based as it was before, then that probably would have been as well. And even that's got a fair bit of I and me running through it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only sort of stance where you on the album where you're not sort of being looked at is where you're looking. So you're the observer on that one track, and then the rest of it is sort of almost like you're exposed, you know, on like on films, or it's that sort of feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, I do. I definitely had, not know if they were problems or not, but I definitely had a particular sort of slant on. Remember also, see, that when, in my teenage years, I was dyeing my hair and all that sort of stuff, and so now loads of people thought I was gay, and I wasn't, but I was having loads of problems. When I went out of the house to do anything, I would, there would be problems, and I was just sort of overreacting to pretty much everything that went along, and it'd all go down there, and it was all me, and it's all me, overreacting to lots of stuff. So, but again, I don't think that's massively different to how a lot of people of that age feel. It's just that I was writing songs and most other people don't, really. So it's kind of.
I mean, I loved it because it is different, and again, like we talked with certain aspects of Pleasure Principle, appeals to certain, people, because of the beats or the style of the music or whatever. I mean, that whole alienated thing has also resonated with lots of people, hasn't it? And,
yeah.
I mean, clearly, say Trent Reznor has talked about it being an important album to him, and it was, hearing Cars and stuff like that. But you can hear that. I can hear that connection. Again, there's certain feelings in his music about being on your own and trying to not being understood and all that sort of stuff that relates very strongly to Pleasure Principle, doesn't it? More strongly than I say. It's in a stronger way, more pure way on that album than even on Telecon, because Telecon's a bit more sophisticated. On Pleasure Principle, it's just right out there. That's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. I thought about it a lot less then, when I was actually making it, because that's just what you are then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now you're trying to think back on it, with a very different head, really, and trying to remember why those particular things were important at the time and why you felt the way you did, and it's difficult sometimes to remember exactly why you thought the way you thought, and some of it is obviously just younger. But some of it's quite cool, and I'm not anti it at all. Which one?
It all seemed incredibly arty to me when I was 14 as well, because there was things like the fact you talk about a surrealist painter in interviews, the Magritte thing with the rock in the cover, but also I remember on the programme when I first saw that for the first tour, there was even quotes from William Burroughs in the talk programme. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
I mean, was that the Bowie influence sort of coming through? Were you really inspired by these things? Did you want to be seen as a bit kind of arty and different? Was that all part of the thing for you? Or?
I'm not sure that I wanted to be seen as arty, because I've never really had a great soft spot for that sort of thing, art. But, I think a lot of art is just nonsense, surrounded by people stroking their chins. making it seem important. And
Mhm.
so I'm not a great fan of a lot of art, Ines. So I'll be surprised if it was that, to be honest. I was genuinely interested in things, but they were more, again, so much of my life is things that I sort of stumbled across,
Right.
rather than gone out and studied and become really learned in. So it's somewhat opportunist, or that's not quite the way of putting it. The Magritte thing. Simply one day looking through a very large book of different surrealist painters, and thinking that some of it was brilliant, and then most of it was utter crap. Didn't get it at all. But the pleasure principle painting, I just thought it was genius. I loved it, and some other things that Magritte had done as well. So I actually did become, although not knowledgeable by any means, I did become something of a fan for a while of Magritte paintings.
And did this happen years before, or was this just...
No, not long before, actually. I remember looking through that book. I think it was the same day that we were actually working on this for the replicas
Right.
cover. Having done the photographs, we were now looking at different ways of the rear sleeve and so on. I was having a little meeting with someone. My memory is so poor that I probably got this totally wrong, but that's how I remember it in those days. But then again, I remember somebody bought me quite early on. Bought me a great big, beautiful book actually that had lots of Magritte stuff in it. So it might have come from that, but I'm pretty sure it was all in that early '79, sort of early to mid '79 period. Because there is no song called Pleasure Principle. I've got a feeling that the title came from
That's right.
having seen the painting. The cover certainly is. Obviously, it's a complete rip-off of the painting. Just my little head there, rather than the light coming out, which is really good. And it's a pyramid instead of a rock, isn't it? It's, so different. Come on, I didn't get sued for that. Anyway, so it wasn't. No, I wasn't trying to be arty. But I think I made sort of good use of the little bit of knowledge and enthusiasm that I had for these few things that I found. But I was so young and so unworldly that every time I stepped out the door, it's I was meeting all these people, and I'd been in a record company. I'd been meeting art directors and people like that, and they would just be opening me up to all this stuff that I didn't know was there, and it was fantastic. Not musically, it was really interesting, and I was learning lots and lots of things, really, really quickly, and loved it. Loved being in the studio, and what does this do? What does that do? Loved all that. But equally, outside of that, when it comes to artwork and photographers, knowing about different photographers, you learn about lighting and shadow and all, so many things, and it was just a really, really exciting time. So more that, I think, more just me suddenly finding all these things which I'd never seen before, and just getting really into it.
Right. And so I've got to ask you, so where did the pyramid idea come from?
Now that I'm not sure. At the time, there was quite a lot of talk about sort of pyramid healing power and all that sort of stuff. It had nothing to do with that. I didn't know anything about that. Because I'd already had the pyramid robots thing was already, I think at that time, might already have been thought about. So, but it became a theme. But I actually can't remember where it came from at all.
I mean, did you have? I mean, you've mentioned before that you had some of the ideas for stage shows sketched in your books, or you'd been writing stories about them even when you were at school.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder whether even the pyramid had come from as far back as that you actually had it in your stage sets, or.
I'm not sure it goes back to school, and I know quite a few of the ideas that I wanted to use.
Did the towers
on stage
go back to those days?
Well, the towers came. I had, when I was working on sort of various essays in school. Mostly it was about stage shows and the rest of it. I'd always invent a story that had a stage show in it somewhere, because I used to like thinking it all through. Now the towers was more something to do with the replicas thing, where in replicas buildings glowed.
Yeah.
As it got darker, the buildings would glow. So there wasn't anywhere, no dark alleys, nothing like that. Everything glowed, and that was where that came from. But that may have started before replicas. That particular idea, can't remember for sure. The pyramid, I really don't remember where it come from.
It's very strongly associated with that period, isn't it? The
Yeah,
pyramid.
yeah. Well, we had, let's say, we had the pyramid on the cover. When we played live, the great big triangle thing behind it. The little robots that came out were pyramid shapes. It was a key part of it, really. It's the most visible logo or symbol, if you like, that identifies that whole album. And is again.
Yes. And so you had the two pyramid robots, Huey and Dewey, as you call them. Whatever happened? Did they eventually break down? Did they get put in storage? Did they just disappear into?
They used to break down all the time. There's kind of constant battle to try to keep them running. They're just little radio control units, from the little model aeroplanes, really, with motors and things. And so all they could do was go forwards or backwards. They would spin around or go in a straight line when they were working, which wasn't very often. They were kept in great big flight cages. They were put into storage for quite some time, but I think eventually they just moved about and they get trashed and broken. And
was there only ever two of them, or was there a whole army of them?
No, just two.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's no backups?
No, just the two. And each one had its own little operator beside the stage with a little joystick thing. Yeah. And on Telecom we had the cubes, with the big one that never really worked, Big Al. I still got them in the car, the little car in Telecom. Still got that. That survived somewhere.
Where's that? I've never seen that.
It's actually still left.
I've never
outside,
seen a picture of Big Al. He's mythical.
I must try and find something. If I could find some, because I'm pretty sure that we were going to use him at Wembley as well. I don't think we did, but I think the plan was to finally make good use of him at Wembley.
Because he's credited on the programme for, I'm sure, unless I got this wrong, of that first tour, Big Al.
What, touring principal?
Yeah.
No, we didn't have a Big Al touring principal.
He's on it because there's a really weird credit. It's probably the only time in rock music, but there's one. Is it Mark Fisher? Who was the guy that did
Nick Fisher.
Nick Fisher. It says Cybernetics next to him, and then it says Hugh and Dewey and Big Al. I'm sure it's on that first programme. Maybe
I'm pretty sure Telecom. Big Al was Telecom.
Okay.
But you know me and my memories. I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure. I'm 99% sure Big Al. Because it complemented the ones we had, because we had two little cubes, and then with heads in, which would light up, and then Big Al was the full body that would light up, which is why it was so tall and very unstable, which is the problem.
Yeah.
I wish I'd heavy.
I wish I'd seen him.
I'm not even sure he ever made it. I think he failed dismally in rehearsals, but I can't remember for sure.
A bit of a jump, but do you remember also at this point wanting to release live EPs after you've gone on tour, you recorded the tour? Because that's one of the parts of this reissue is that Steve Webben found these boxes with a track listing and mixes that you'd done of tracks from that first tour, and you had them planned as singles.
Right.
Do you remember any of that as a follow-up basically to Complex?
Really? No.
Right.
Do you remember?
Did at one point you also think about putting Metal out as a single?
Well, it was used by I think TNT TV did a really good video for Metal. Some big sort of generating place, which is really good fun to do. And so I'm pretty sure at that point it was that they just wanted to use that song rather than because they wanted to do a new video for their own program, not as a video for me. And at that point, and it worked really, really well. So I think there was talk then of it coming out as a single, but I think my rate of moving on, as you say, was so fast that I was probably already writing Telecom by then, and so just wanted to do that. I in those days, very opposite to now, I was writing new stuff so quickly that it was often overtaking a sensible period for still trying to promote and sell what you already put out. I know in America, for example, that we put Telecon out way too quickly for the record company, because they still thought Pleasure Prince was another 6 months to a year of them being able to sell it and get more out of it. We forced through Telecon, and that upset them a lot. But that was my problem. I was just churning this stuff out and just wanting to keep moving forward and forward, because everything sounded better. With Telecon coming along, it sounded so much better and more professional than Pleasure Prince. I was just desperate to get that out there, and I didn't want to be dwelling on this one because I'd done something better. So why sit on that for a year? Because this was even better. People are going to love that even more than that. But I didn't really understand the way the business worked. I did myself some harm with that one.
Okay, talking about cars for a minute. One of the things that Gerald told me is that he said that he remembers as a teenager you telling him that you were going to have a #1 single with a song called Cars even before you'd written it. Is that his memory playing up, or did you have this idea floating around?
I don't remember that, but I don't remember yesterday. So if Gerald's got a really good memory of that, then that's quite possible. But I don't have it. I wrote Cars because of what happened to me in London that time. When I got set upon by those boys and those men. So I've always believed that obviously it came from that, and that's why it's called Cars, and because of what it's about, because of that incident. And I don't remember. I don't remember having that idea before about Cars.
I mean, at what point did you realise you might have what is, I suppose, as close as you've ever got to a pop song? At what point did you realise this might actually be something that could break you? As I guess you wrote it before Our Friends Electric.
Well, it was written on a bass guitar really quickly, and I think I said before, and the whole thing took about 10-15 minutes to write. So it was ever so quick. But at that point, it's just a riff and a little lyric over the top of it. It wasn't until we got it into the studio that the big Polymoog line went on the front, and as we were doing the demos for that, so Our Friends Electric was beginning to take off, and now all of a sudden becoming famous. Up until then, I would never have thought of that as being a hit single. It's just another song on the journey. But with Our Friends Electric doing what it did, and now you've got this song, suddenly it's a completely different animal. This now begins to sound like it could be a really big single because I've already got one, and this sounds like a much poppier version, or much poppier song rather than that one, much catchier. So at that point, yes, it began to seem as if it was quite.
And did everyone?
likely.
I mean, did Martin Mills? Did they all kind of? I mean, at times you'd had to fight them in the past a bit about following the electronic direction. But,
certainly a bit at the beginning,
But when they heard Cars, did they also kind of go, yeah, this could be?
Yeah, I think Cars was, from the word go, was pretty much the one that people saw as being the obvious single from that record. And once all the high strings went on it, and the vocal interlaced with the high strings, and it had some sort of reasonable structure, and it sort of hits you right from the beginning, doesn't it? A lot of my stuff doesn't. A lot of stuff takes a while to get going. Cars is probably the only true pop song I've ever written.
I mean, it's got tambourine on it.
Yeah.
Was that a late edit? And you're playing tambourine in a video, the only futurist with a tambourine. But was that a late edition? Because I've always said I think the tambourine's a great little extra touch.
What else you do? You're in the studio. You've got your mini moog and your poly moog, which you've kind of used, and the tambourine in the corner. So let's use that as well. And sometimes those things that you hit, skulls, but whatever's lying around, really, you just used it all.
And what makes that little noise at the start? Is that a mini moog?
No, it's an MXR phaser pedal. Oh, a bit like, you see this?
Oh yeah.
Well, like that, but a bit wider, and but a guitar effect effectively
Right,
is, I think
okay.
it's a tremolo actually. Yeah, tremolo. Just turn it on really, really fast,
Okay.
and you put your signal through it and you go.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
Put too much depth on it. That's why it did what it did. But yeah, just one of those little effects pedals that you stamp on the floor. That's all it is.
I mean, although our Friends Electric broke you in the UK, and I guess set up things then for you to be broken internationally, Cars is the one that really did that, wasn't it? I mean, it especially in America.
In America, particularly, yeah. I think our Friends Electric did quite well in Europe. Most of Europe, in fact, most places. But America and Canada, but particularly America, it was Cars that did it. I think even to this day, it's the only decent single I've ever had in America. And here now, I think Cars is the one that people remember. Although at the time, Cars wasn't quite as big as our Friends Electric. Our Friends Electric was #1 for longer. But over the years, Cars has been re-released and it's been in the chart, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times now, and obviously sampled huge amounts, and it's probably become the defining song for me more than our Friends Electric.
I mean, do you have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, and that at times it's felt a bit dominating, or do you?
Well, Cars and our Friends Electric have had that, have obviously been brilliant, and what they've done for me, but they've also sort of worked against me a little bit, and people assume that that's the only 2 songs you've ever written, all those usual problems when 2 songs are so massive compared to whatever else you've done. But no, I loved them both really. Cars has always been a bit tricky because the singing happens in the first minute, and then there's another 2 minutes of just standing there trying to look windswept and interesting. So, in terms of playing it live, I've always found, especially on television, because at least at a gig you can sort of walk about a bit and sit down the front and you can do something, or just sit down and watch the band or whatever. But on television, you're expected to.
Yeah.
You don't. It's very embarrassing. It's been. I wish I'd written a few more lyrics for it. But I know I love it. I got no bad feelings about it at all. There've been moments when I found it frustrating, and you get to do a TV or something, and they want you to play that song or one of those 2 songs, and you're desperate to play your new stuff. So there are times when I've been denied opportunities because of them, and that's been a bit frustrating. But overall, obviously, to have written either of those 2 songs is a very cool thing. I'm sure. I think it was actually. Not that sound, obviously, but. How did it used to go? Can't remember my mistake now. That's it. Quite a different feel, isn't it? No, I had 2 of these.
Oh, you did have these.
And then
a version without all the sliders.
Yeah, then there's another 14 preset one, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that was what was on Cars, because it was the #1 preset of the other version that had the Voxy minor sound.
Yeah, because this doesn't have that. Yeah,
No,
you're right. That's the sound this doesn't have. You can program it though.
You can do a lot more with this one. It's a lot more controllable.
Yeah.
Compared to the other one. But the other one was just quicker, just to bang up the sound, and you tweak it the way you wanted and the way you went. A bit more of a serious bit of kit, these. But they were the most unreliable things.
Yeah.
I'm still sort of immersed in my computer and plugins and all that at the moment. This seems like quite hard work. Yeah. What? You wouldn't know where to start. I think there's an immediacy to the whole plugin thing. That you just turn it on, twiddle something, and automatically kind of something great comes out, and it's so much of that is done for you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an easy option, I guess.
Yeah.
Really, but it is fast.
But it does sort of end up often sounding like lots of other stuff that's out there. It's not
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
got its own sound really.
Well, I think that's up to the individual though
Yeah.
to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they are very capable bits of software. You know, they can do some really brilliant things, but it's quite easy to just turn it on and go through a list of presets and say, "I'll have that one,"
Yeah.
and then tweak the back end slightly and think you've programmed it, and you've not. But I think that's down to your individual standards, really. That's
Yeah.
what you go for. But equally, though, I mean, a lot of the things that these can do, it'd be very easy to make sounds that we've all heard before with that.
Yeah, it's
You know,
true,
I think it's very much down to the person operating it to come up with something different to anyone else has come up with, be it this sort of technology or even that,
Yeah.
or something more modern, you know.
But also the other thing with sort of computer stuff is that you kind of never finish anything, because you can always kind of recall an older project or an older song that you've kind of half finished or whatever and tweak it and go back to it. But there's something kind of nice about using this stuff, because you have to like commit to something on the day at the time you're doing it and then get it down, and then kind of you can't really go back and change it.
No, it's good. It focuses your decision making.
Yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
it? It's common. It's common for me to have a song where I'll have 6 options for a chorus, completely different choruses, because I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just can't decide which one, so I'll add another one even.
Yeah.
With this sort of thing, like in the days when I was using these,
Yeah.
not only did you have to play it properly because you couldn't fix it,
Yeah.
but that was it. You had to play it right, and that was the end of it. And you had to make a decision on what the notes were going to be, because this is the take.
Yeah.
It was vibey, I say that, and I never really felt sort of pressured in a way that sort of stopped your own creativity. You know, it was really vibey, and you was in there. How about that? Oh, great.
Yeah.
But nowadays you can spend the whole day just. Oh, I think I could make that snare jump just a bit better. Yeah.
It must have been very exciting back in the sort of 70s when these sounds were completely new. They were like, you know, when you were starting, you know, your first sort of few albums, it was like completely new.
I felt anyway as if we was right up the front end of something really quite special.
Yeah.
You know, and I listen back to a lot of it now, and it sounds small and thin compared to what, you know, obviously things have evolved over the years, but at the time it felt genuinely innovative, and you almost couldn't fail but to do something interesting, because pretty much everything you were doing was new, because nobody was really using, or very few people were using this sort of equipment and doing those sort of things with it. I remember, you know, I got into trouble with the musicians union because they said I was putting musicians out of work, but I was going, you know, and doing all that sort of stuff. Yeah, what musician did that? Nobody could make those sort of noises. Who was I putting out of work? You know, it's a really stupid sort of attitude to take, but it's such a reaction against them when when I became successful and it all became sort of quite massive, and electronic music became the thing that everyone was talking about. The reaction against it was massive. I don't think all of this machinery, the pleasure, if you like, of listening to a really good player, you know, will always be there.
Yeah.
You know, these things tend to replace the other people, the not so good ones.
It's funny, as I say, it's very different, and there's a huge benefit in that, for a while, in that you're kind of the leader, but then, as you say, or hinted at, I mean, there's then all the problems that come with that, and in a way it was so early. If you think, you know, we're still quite a long way away from MTV, and a lot of the ideas that you were sort of putting forward, you know, whether it was about show business coming back or electronics and so on, only really sort of became acceptable as a mass thing really a year or two later, didn't they? Especially in America. I think by the time you were over living in America, that's really when the British wave hit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a little bit later anyway.
And in a way, I sometimes think you had a slight problem there, in that because you were so early, you almost missed that kick that they all had from MTV.
Yeah.
It was like you were already kind of
Peaked too soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
you was already been established in a way. You weren't a breaking artist in the way the Duran Durans and so on were, just as MTV hit.
Yeah.
18 months later, or whatever.
Yeah, it's difficult to know exactly how that would all have worked out. I still think the biggest problem to me in America was putting Telecon out too soon, because I killed a perfectly healthy record that was still growing and still building, and I killed it stone dead by putting Telecon out way too soon, and that was just to a certain amount of bad advice from a British record company who wanted it out for their own figures, just to look good, and me just being naive and a tad ignorant, and so the whole way the American thing went is very much down to me, really. But then again, I was with big labels, and I was getting different advice from different sides of the Atlantic, and I didn't really have a manager at the time, so couldn't really be expected to know really the ins and outs of how it all worked behind the scenes. But nonetheless, it was me that was pushing for it. It was my fault.
Although, I mean, they say that they were going to promote it. I mean, there wasn't really a follow-up single on Pleasure Principle. It wasn't. I mean, Complex had come out, but that hadn't.
They almost went backwards, I think. I think they re-released Arthur into Electric as Gary Numan and True Miami. It seemed to sort of lose its way a little bit at some point. You see, something like Metal. You thought, well, Metal probably would have been a really good follow-up in America. I'm not sure. I don't even remember much discussion about what to do as a follow-up to it. Because I think the whole Telecom thing was already on its way.
Were you disappointed when Complex didn't hit number one? Didn't quite. I mean, it's one of my favourite songs, but it's not in the public's mind sort of sealed in the way that Cars and Our Friends Electric.
No, but then again, was it number 6, wasn't it? Anything that gets number 6 won't be the same as a number one record. Not just because it's obviously the biggest to get to number 1 at all, but it comes to have a lot more life after that. There's certain shows at the end of the year, your year roundup shows. It's on those, and and all your compilation albums. It gets on all those, but number 6 doesn't. So those number 1 albums, number 1 singles, really get driven in, and they become kind of unforgettable, really. Where number 2 or 6 doesn't. They just don't last in the same way, with a few exceptions, obviously. But generally speaking, the number 1 album, number 1 singles are just a lot more opportunities for them to be driven into your head. So when Complex didn't get to number 1, I was quite disappointed. Not that I was expecting everything to go to number 1, but you've had 2. It's not unreasonable to think you might get another one out of it. And I thought it was quite a nice little song, and I thought it was a nice change from what I'd done before. I still do, actually. I think it's a lovely little song, Complex. Quite like it. But at the time, it just seemed as if I'd have some number 1, some that weren't, but they'd all be doing quite well. So it didn't seem like any big deal to me.
And you said that when that viola part was played on it, you were asleep.
Did I?
Yeah, you said that in interviews before. I don't know whether that's true.
I must be true there. No, I don't remember being asleep. Because I remember Chris did it. I did the synthesizer part.
Right.
Again, by just stumbling along as I tend to, and it all kind of worked really well. And then Chris did the viola part, I think, around it, or the other way around. But I don't remember being asleep.
Right.
when he did it, because I remember.
Right, you do remember that one.
Thinking it was brilliant.
Really
I love what
works.
Chris did. I thought it was really beautiful. But it's quite possible.
And the actual piano, is that actually your fingers on the keys playing the piano bits on that? Or did you get Chris and...
No, I think it's me.
Because there is a bit more piano on Pleasure Principle, isn't there? There's things like the opening to tracks and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's quite simple though.
Yeah.
There's nothing There's nothing on Pleasure Principle that I can think of which is beyond me. Of course, in those days, it's before sequencing, where you can correct things and make yourself sound far better than you are.
There is a bit of a jump from the Pleasure Principle artwork where you got brown hair and a sort of Oxfam suit.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a bit of a mistake?
Hey?
Do you think that was a bit of a mistake when you looked towards it?
Yeah. Not quite as prepared as I should have been. Yeah.
But then anyway, you got it sorted by the tour. You got the hair back, and you got the all black look with the red and blue tie.
Yeah.
Where was the red and blue? Was this something you drawn, or was it something you saw? Or?
No, I saw that. That was trouting around Kensington Market, I think. Some of the little boots.
Well, I love the boots. Yeah, white and.
Well, they had the black and whites. I had different ones. I had all black ones.
Yeah.
But a lot of that stuff came from Kensington Market. The ties certainly did. We all went in there and got our own favourite colour mix. So the thing that the replica thing actually with the the strap going across and all that was in some of the pictures. I actually saw somebody in a club wearing that. I thought that really
Right.
good. A lot of the things are just things that I've seen either in a photograph or out and about. And I don't sort of sit there at home and it all just comes to me, because I'm not. I guess I'm better at just seeing stuff and then adapting it when it comes to visuals. Yes. Anyway, no, I found the ties in a shop. Not particularly creative, that is it. At the time, so much going on. I mean, as soon as you got off an aeroplane and there was stuff going on, and you just get a little bit sort of swamped by it all. You're not as aware or as blown away by things as you should be, because there's just so much of it, and it's not so much taking it for granted as there's just so much going on. You sort of can't really cope with it all, and you're just being pushed here, and somebody will collect you and take you there, and you do this. You don't even know what you're doing. You don't even know what you're going there for, who you're going to see. You just turn up there and you do what they tell you, and you go somewhere else, and you do there, and then the next day you go to another country, and you do something different there, and I was on adverts and all kinds of stuff in all different places all over the world, and most of it I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
But I was beginning to struggle with it. The massiveness of everything, and the stress, if you like, of being a solo act, and it all kind of coming at you, and feeling a lot of it. I was really unnatural at even little things like doing radio, idents. Hello, I'm Gary Numan. You're listening to 3XM, all that sort of stuff. I used to find those excruciatingly embarrassing, and really didn't want to do them because I just thought I sounded like a knob. And they thought I was being awkward because I was doing them badly. Pretend to be tired or something, and I was doing so many what seemed just awkward or weird things simply because I was so out of my depth. I couldn't tell you, and a lot of the time I was embarrassed. A lot of the time I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. Just terrible. I was a terrible pop star. Really, I was really not good at it, to be honest. I wasn't. I was really not good at it.
I don't think in the annals of pop history that pop stars are rated at how they do their idents. I think.
Well, not just idents, the whole pop star thing. I was just not particularly good at it. It took me a long time. In fact, I probably didn't get used to it until the whole pop star thing had gone. And then you become whatever you become after that, and it becomes a little bit more manageable, and you feel like you understand it a bit more, and you've learnt a certain amount, and you deal with it better, and it's not such a shock, and the workload itself obviously backs off quite a bit anyway. But I think when I was a pop star, I think I was not a good one. I don't think I handled it well at all, and I think I was my own worst enemy for much of it. and much of that I blame on age, and some of it I blame on my quirky and unfortunate personality.
Well, a lot of it is age, because you haven't got. Also, you're possibly worried about. You've got all these issues about, there's an image that you projected, and can you actually back it up? Isn't there? There's that sort of, which as you get older gradually fades. It disappears. It's not. People have got used to you as Gary Numan, whereas then there is always that first. Sort of thing where it's almost like you've got special powers, isn't it? I mean, I think David Bowie said, it's like you're imbued with these special powers. People believe that, you are a rock god,
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of meet people, and you're always worried about, I suppose, or whether you're going to damage that image or say the right thing. So it's not a natural situation at all, is it? On top of everything else. It's nothing natural.
It is natural.
Yeah.
Nothing. Every single part of your life is different. Every single tiny part is changing. Some things you get used to and quickly, and other things obviously not. And it's a big thing to go through.
Well, you always seem to enjoy interviews now.
Now?
Yeah.
Do I?
Yeah.
Funny enough, I dread them more now than I ever did before.
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Because over the years, I've lost that arrogance where I used to think that everything I said was interesting. Because I did, and now I just realise that I've done so many interviews where I've said the wrong thing, and really got myself in trouble. And now I realise that an interview is just an open invitation to put your foot in it.
But when I first met you, you were really nervous about interviews, like edgy about it. But you never seem to be now.
No, I am.
You just hid it. You're hiding it better.
Oh, I've got this sort of humble thing going, and.
What, were you nervous about doing, talking to George Lamb this morning?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
God, not interesting.
Yeah, a little bit. Not because I find that the interview situation daunting. It's just that my capacity for saying the wrong thing is unlimited, and that's what I'm worried about, because things are going so much better now, and my relationship with the press and the media in general is so much better, that it seems that the only thing that's going to mess it up is me saying something bloody stupid, at exactly the wrong moment, and I blurt stuff, I blurt honestly, and I don't stop and think sometimes before I blurt, and that's always been my problem, be it arrogant or just too honest, a mixture of both maybe. But I have really got myself in trouble quite seriously at times by not being sympathetic and not being sensitive to other people's opinions and views on things, because I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at people stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm nervous of them. It doesn't matter to me whether they got an audience of 1 or 10 million. It's not that's nerve-wracking. It's my ability to damage myself. And not just the public. The amount of times I've upset fans. I went on talking about Joe the Waiter once, and I thought it was just crap. Which I do, by and large.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a particularly good song. Jim thinks it's the best thing I've ever written. I just. What are you talking about? It's this nonsensical little ditty. To me, it's nonsense, and then I get what do I know? I get fans giving me a hard time saying that I'm insulting them because they like that stuff. So I'm insulting their taste, and it all gets too complicated for me. I can't even put myself down without getting myself in trouble. So I find interviews very nerve-wracking.
Okay.
Don't let me talk, that's the best thing. I shouldn't say anything.